Fans have been desperate for a follow-up to Quentin Tarantino's seminal film Pulp Fiction since it hit the silver screen. But 30 years later, it seems unlikely that we'll ever see a sequel. Pulp Fiction was the second feature film made by writer-director Quentin Tarantino. He's now closing in on his 10th, and in 2023, he celebrated his 60th birthday. Sadly, Tarantino has often talked up the notion of retiring after both of those milestones. Unfortunately for die-hard Pulp Fiction fans, that 10th film isn't going to be a follow-up to the 1994 classic. Instead, it's a project called The Movie Critic, which is about a 1970s critic who reviews films for a porno magazine. If it really is his final film, that kills off quite a few potential Tarantino projects. At various points in his career, he's floated ideas like a gangster-style Star Trek movie, a third Kill Bill entry, and a movie about black soldiers during World War II. So, assuming that Tarantino sticks to his guns when it comes to feature film retirement, we won't be seeing any of those movies play out on the big screen. In other words, the time has passed for Pulp Fiction 2. Other persistent issues have long dogged Pulp Fiction 2 ownership and rights. As it turns out, it may have been tough for Tarantino to even legally make a sequel to his own film. The director owns the copyright of the Pulp Fiction script, but Miramax owns the finished film. Evidently, when Tarantino tried to make Pulp Fiction NFTs, he wound up in a lawsuit with Miramax that ended in 2022. If just making non-fungible tokens was that contentious, imagine how it might have hampered the making of another movie. Over the last 3 decades, Pulp Fiction writer-director Quentin Tarantino has openly discussed at least 3 films that would have expanded the film's universe. In the 1990s, following the back-to-back successes of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, Tarantino toyed with the idea of linking the 2 films in a new project called Double V Vega. In that movie, Michael Madsen and John Travolta would have reprised their respective Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction roles of Vic Vega and Vincent Vega, because they're brothers. Essentially a prequel to both movies, it would have been about the Vega siblings hanging out in Amsterdam, a trip that Vincent Vega alludes to in his Pulp Fiction opening monologue. Tarantino never went anywhere with Double V Vega, which was also billed as the Vega Brothers, other than that premise. And given that 30 years have passed, it's probably too late for Madsen and Travolta to play younger versions of their characters. As for other possibilities, there's a scene in Pulp Fiction in which Jules Winfield tells Vincent,
"I'm just gonna walk the earth."
What you mean, walk the earth?
You know, like Kane in Kung Fu. Walk from place to place, meet people, get in adventures.
Tarantino thought about making that single line of dialogue into a whole movie, but he told movie nerds that it never moved beyond the idea realm. As for the third potential film, while promoting Kill Bill in 2003, Tarantino told Aotearoa News that a sequel was stirring. He said, "There's an idea I have. Bottom line, the studio wants it, fans want it, I'm sure I can compromise somewhere. It'd be my way of apologizing for never getting Vega Brothers off the ground, I guess." Nevertheless, that movie never did get produced. Due to the events of the first Pulp Fiction, and circumstances affecting the cast's ability or willingness to participate in the present day, any follow-up film set in the same cinematic universe couldn't serve as a direct sequel. For example, Vincent Vega, portrayed by John Travolta in the film, doesn't make it out of Pulp Fiction alive, while Bruce Willis, who played rogue boxer Butch Coolidge, retired from acting after developing dementia. As for the rest of the cast, it seems like it might take Tarantino a lot of work to convince Samuel L. Jackson to reprise his role of hitman Jules Winfield. In 2022, Tarantino derisively discussed the marvelization of Hollywood on the podcast Two Bears, One Cave. Jackson portrays Nick Fury throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe and took umbrage at his Pulp Fiction director's comments, firing back at him on The View. As for Uma Thurman, who played Mia Wallace, her relationship with Tarantino has been rocky. In 2018, she told the New York Times that she nearly died in a car stunt gone awry during the filming of Kill Bill, a stunt the director reportedly forced her to do. And allegedly, Tarantino spat on her and choked her for 2 separate scenes. Thurman has said that she forgave Tarantino for the car incident after the director apologized, and it's very likely the filmmaker could patch things up with Jackson over their Marvel feud. Still, it seems like there might be some friction between Tarantino and the key players involved. So even if a Pulp Fiction 2 were a possibility, getting the band back together might be pretty difficult at this point. Writing, directing, producing, and releasing a movie, particularly a sequel to a 30-year-old film, is a difficult and complicated task. It might be more pragmatic and easier for Tarantino to release the long-rumored and often speculated Pulp Fiction follow-up in another format, like the written word, a medium Tarantino has actively explored in recent years. In 2021, he published Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a novelization and expansion of his 2019 film of the same name. And according to Dave Poland, in the 2010s, Tarantino began writing a literary spin-off of his Django Unchained project called Django in White Hell, which evolved into The Hateful Eight. However, he did give Django life on the page, pairing the gunfighting hero up with one of the world's most famous masked vigilantes in the comic book, Django Zorro. And while these aren't real sequels, other artists and professionals have revisited the world of Pulp Fiction in their projects. In 2023, Deadline reported that production had started on Stealing Pulp Fiction, a heist movie from director-writer Danny Turkovitz about a group of friends who try to abscond with Tarantino's copy of the original 35mm Pulp Fiction film reels. And back in 2014, Harvey Keitel reprised his role as the inscrutable and effective Pulp Fiction fixer Winston Wolfe in a series of commercials for UK insurance company Direct Line.